Okay, hang on. Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, wow, it's going to work. Oh, fantastic. Where's this little window on the moon? Okay, so anyway, a couple of things. I've got a lot to get through, so if get your pencil in your hand, because we're going to move quickly, and I'll try and get to the end early so for questions. So first of all, I'm very new to academia, as well as both traditional and contemporary Indigenous cultural ways. As a result, I apologise for anything I may say, due to my inexperience in such matters. My journey into indigeneity has not been a typical one. It's somehow been reverse engineered upon reflection after the fact. It's sort of been an embodied, untangling, uncolonising process. And I say this because my journey into indigeneity has not come through cultural means, as in human-to-human cultural means. And I don't have any language yet. I want to get there, but as this unfolds, you'll see my journey. So my stage 1 assessment for confirmation of candidature is in 3 months. So any difficult questions, by all means, please ask. Okay, I'd like to thank the following people along my journey. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, you're listening. Okay, great. And we're going to move into, voila. Okay, so here's my fancy title. Utilising of the cultural interface, a phenomenological synthesis of Gumbaynggirr spatial learning in a type of Western way. Now this is really a thought experiment that has come about through my trying to understand my journey back into indigeneity and what parts of my Western upbringing are being removed and the reality of my experience as opposed to my imagination. So that's what this is. And that's so I'm tiptoeing between this understanding I had of my connection to the land, right, and trying to understand how I fit into it. And then we have this university life that I've got. So I think the story of my, more the Indigenous flavour of what I'm trying to do is the woven roles of story, connection to country, to local ecological knowledge, ancestral guidance, the co-formation of an in-between space and Aboriginal self-determination on, with and for Gumbaynggirr country, an Indigenous knowledge research project. Knowing that though, I think it's quite important to understand that as I'm reading, these things are popping up and I think they're of interest. And I do understand that once a story has been told, it can't be called back. And I understand the importance of stories as I move forward through this process. So here are some of the themes. By all means, take your notes. I've chosen, well, it's just unfolded this way. These are the things I'm looking at in my journey. Ancestral guidance, connection to country and placemaking, earthkin and the more than human, Indigenous sensory knowledge systems, local ecological knowledge, methodology being a content, and artefactual evidence, knowledge having agency, and the appropriate nexus having predispositions towards being both an insider and an outsider, which is the path I'm negotiating, and cultural legitimacy beyond the political. By all means, stop me at any point. I can explain stuff, but I'm just going to keep running through it. So my evidence that I'll be submitting through this will be an actual space, a co-created place. I'm going to use the word in-between space because I'll give you the definition of that later on. That's a government's term for this because I've found that it doesn't matter, we're always within the realm of the Western knowledge system. And so sometimes I have to look at their definitions and compare them to my own experiences. Also, I'm offering up observational imagery of experience through photography as art. So a lot of the time, my experiences that I have, I'll just take a photo. I'll have an iPhone on me or my camera. It's not that I go searching for the imagery, it's just when it happens, I think I'll take a photo of that. It's very difficult to sort of explain through words a lot of the things that I've experienced. And then the third thing that I'm looking to do as evidence, as an artefact, is I'm looking to develop a culture, a curricula of cultural preservation and adaptation within this place, this property, this piece of land. Grain Morning's been there once. It was a very rainy day, but when you come back, I'll have to show you all of these things. So significant citations, these are some of the things that I have to work within. So the New South Wales government, so this is a government definition, okay? So this is the government talking about how they allow, or what they allow, or how land should be, can be used. So an in-between space are important aspects of Aboriginal culture, spirituality, holding significant meaning and symbolism. In Aboriginal culture and in-between spaces are often seen as places of transformation, where individuals can connect, communicate with others, the spiritual realm, undergo personal growth and development. So the thing is, that's their definition of something that Indigenous people would have a different knowing of, or a different understanding. I mean, the government here, they talk about Aboriginal spirituality, or they talk about culture, spirituality, but they just stick it in words. But what does that actually mean? So they give these guidelines, and they use these words, but it's like, but how do you know? Like, you know, what does that actually mean in reality? What is the experience of being in a place like that? They don't really tell you anything beyond that. So it's somewhat of that thing that Graham was talking about, how anyone can put on an outfit type thing. Okay? So in a way, okay, I might go back one. So here is the, I guess it's a key term in my research, and that's moving from what you're allowed to do within the Western space from an Indigenous perspective, and it's a term I call the transcription ceiling. And that is the epistemological and structural limit at which the dynamic relational sentience of country can no longer be translated into the noun-centric grammar of Western spatial management without losing its ontological integrity. It's not an intentional failure by architects and spatial designers, but an inherent boundary condition of the Western grid, where living relational pedagogies hit the ceiling and are inevitably flattened into a static municipal object or spacelessness, demonstrating why unmediated ecological places are required for authentic Aboriginal relational pedagogy. So the thing that with developing the piece of land and working with it, I've just done what has come naturally through an experiential understanding. I haven't gone in the idea of, okay, I'm going to plan something, or I'm going to get a DA, or I'm going to work within the council guidelines of the Environmental Protection Act. I've just sort of, it exists, the use of the space conceptually in my mind, and when I bring other people there, but it's not legal as such, because it hasn't been formulated into the grid, into their way of understanding it. That doesn't mean it's not real though. Another significant thing within my studies, and that's local ecological knowledge. So my journey hasn't come through a cultural understanding. So it's not so much that I've been using traditional ecological knowledge or Indigenous ecological knowledge. The fact is I've been using local ecological knowledge. Now there may be a connection, or there may be a reference to traditional ecological knowledge and Indigenous ecological knowledge. But the point is that has happened through hundreds and thousands of years, but it's always started through the local understanding, your local present understanding of it, and then it becomes, embedded in history, embedded in tradition. You know? So, okay, here we go. So, from that, when we're talking about designing space and working within the dwelling areas and that idea that the Western framework has its grid and you've got to fit within certain things and they've got rules and whatnot, and they'll put lines on borders, but the sentience of country just flows all through it and all along it. So we get to this idea of, like, when you're dealing with land, that the idea of traditional Aboriginal societies only had a few basic structures. It stems from a Western definition of infrastructure, which privileges permanent stone, concrete. We shift the definition of infrastructure to systems designed to sustain human life and ecological balance over millennia. The Australian continent is revealed to be highly engineered. In Western thought, architecture requires clearing of the natural wealth to erect something human-made. From an Aboriginal or Indigenous perspective, country itself is the primary architecture. The landscape is not a passive canvas waiting for human construction. It's a sentient living thing. And the difference is, the distinction, I'm going to go to the bottom paragraph, is that the distinction between the built environment, which is not found in built, and then a managed ecological environment, where you exist within the environment, where you're not on top. Now, I don't have any language. I've spoken about that before, and you're probably wondering, well, how's he getting anything done? Well, I've been looking into, this is all through my literature review, something called Indigenous sensory knowledge systems. And these are knowledge systems that exist, pretty cognitive, and I guess which your language comes out to describe after the fact. Now, because I don't have any language, it's probably, well, I'm keen to get some, but it's just, where is all the time coming from? It's the next thing. Because I feel that it will help me understand what I've done from a different perspective. But anyway, these Indigenous sensory knowledge systems I've found, and they're quite, they're disparate in that not all the knowledge of everything is left, like a lot is lost, but there are some, and they're from different spaces and different places. But I'll be trying to incorporate their understanding into my particular journey, and also when I bring other people to the place. Because verification of what I've done is not coming from me. It's going to come from other people with more experience in cultural ways and historical context. You can say, wow, something actually has happened here. There has been a transfer of information in a way. So I don't know if you've heard of any of these, but one's called Didara, it's quite a famous one. And it's, as it says, it's an inner deep listening and quite still awareness. Functions as primary gateway to readying a researcher to receive sentient data prior to the Western analytical issues take over, or prior to the idea of you trying to communicate it through language. Okay? So there's another one called Gamma, which is very similar to Eptuama, utilising, it's an Indigenous version, where the saltwater and freshwater meets. Okay, and they have a whole philosophy around it. There are similar ones in other nations and whatnot. I think it's a similar thing with saltwater, freshwater people, which is my ancestry. There's also something called Onya and Liam. I'll just quickly whip through these, and we can go back and have a conversation. I can give this to anyone after the fact as well, but I've got to sort of describe everything and bring it all together. But on the way, I won't have that much detail through. So how am I going for time?
You're good. You're the last speaker.
Good.
You're the last speaker, so you can overflow. I mean, you can flow over.
I might want to ask the audience that. Okay, so another interesting one is this idea of Nanga. And it's an imaginary visionary observation. It's a tool for conjuring past and future possibilities to transcribe the invisible agency of the country into physical form. Now, I'm relying on that one a lot, in a way, because that's what I'm presenting. I'm presenting artefacts. And so this might be an understanding of a method by which, wow, that's maybe how these things have happened. Otherwise, it's all just coincidence and guesswork and my imagination. And another particular one is Bergen that I'm interested in. And that is the shimmer and energetic brilliance of a place. Okay, so we're talking about feelings, visions, sounds, sensory input, and somehow being translated into action. I'm just going to keep on trucking. So here we go, this big one. So two-eyed seeing of the cultural interface. What is that? What is your thought experiment? How does it go about working? Okay. So I'm going to try and I think the idea is that let me go one more further. Okay, well, so I'll show you. Well, I'll just keep going through the definitions, and I'll talk about them more freely afterwards. So, Etwaptama, two-eyed seeing, is defined as learn to see from one eye with the strength of Indigenous ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strength of Western ways of knowing. It's using both of these eyes together. So I think that's the method that I'm going to use. Right, for my perceptive understanding, my cognitive understanding is how do I report back to the university? How do I report these things? I have to take both into consideration. And I have to take both into consideration in my life, actually, because it's one foot in each camp. Okay? I'd rather it not be, but this is the world we're born into, I am. The cultural interface. So the cultural interface is a multi-layered, multi-dimensional space of dynamic relations constituted by the intersections of time, place, distance, different systems of thought, competing and contesting discourses within and between different knowledge traditions and different systems of social, economic and political organisation. A lot of it, when I understand these words and these terms, just like Grey Morning was saying before about you understand things through language in your mind, and that's true, but I'll just go back to one thing he said also. He said that when he's talking to children, he said, do you think in language, or don't correct me if I'm wrong, but it was no, I think in images, or things like that. And I guess it's the same way for me, in that I'm thinking experiences and feelings. I'm not yet at language yet, okay, for this Indigenous perspective of my life. Okay, so now, because I'm trying to marry the Western eye with the Indigenous eye, it's about trying to find methodologies and frameworks that are similar-ish. So, because I'm looking at a space and a place, an artefact that has been created, and it's like I find the interest is, well, that must be that environment of learning, because obviously I've learned to do this. And if I've understood all the sensory things and whatnot has happened, then surely there must be a way to teach it. Now, if I'm going to teach, and I know this with Gumbaynggirr school, you've always got an accountability to the Western system. It doesn't matter how much autonomy within reason you're given, you still have to fit within the framework, of that Western system of education. So, I correct me if I'm wrong, to Grand Morning, but at some point there will be a component at the Freedom School where the New South Wales Department of Education or something will have their say in something. Otherwise, they're just not going to. It's not like, okay, great, you've got your language taught at school, go for it.
They've already been. Yeah, they've already tried that, Howard. They've already tried that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm familiar because I come from education. And so anyway, within education, there was an interesting theorist called Elliot Eisner, and he talked in terms of having a connoisseurship approach to education. So not the idea of, okay, we're just going to have a checklist, yep, they've done that, tick, 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 tick. And he talks in terms of, if connoisseurship is the art of appreciation, then criticism is the art of disclosure. What the critic aims at is to disclose the qualities of an event or object that might go otherwise unnoticed. Okay, so connoisseurship is the private capacity to notice, appreciate, and make fine distinctions among complex qualities in educational environments. And criticism is the public rendering and disclosure of those observations. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if I got some Western educational experts that understood things from that framework, and then I paired them up with Indigenous elders and knowledge holders. Okay, and so this is leading to like a framework that I'll get there. And so beyond the connoisseurship process of appreciation, how do you get there? And then there was two other theorists called Harlow and Hamilton, and they come up with this idea of illuminative evaluation. And the primary concern of illuminative evaluation is to illuminate a complex array of questions. I mean, here he's talking specifically about a Western school, but I think it can be translated. How does the program operate, or how does the experiential time operate? How is it influenced by the various school situations or the various interactions of the people there? What do those directly concern regard as its advantages and not? So it shifts the evaluation lens away from merely asking, did the intervention hit qualitative targets, to illuminating the lived holistic reality of the learning milieu and the subjective experiences of the participants. And I thought, okay, that one might work with communing or walking country, which is, an idea in Indigenous understanding. You have to be and sit with the land, right? It's something you have to walk around and be involved in. And I thought, okay, so with those two frameworks of illumination and connoisseurship, that might be some way that a Western mind could sort of, understand or start to get an understanding of what's required from the Indigenous mindset with regard to education and places of learning. Also with regard to the experiential understanding that Indigenous people have with connecting to country, through those sensory knowledge systems, I thought it might be interesting, well, wow, I wonder if we could find out through non-Indigenous people, these Western professionals or these Western appraisers, whether phenomenology might be an interesting way to judge their experience. Okay, and I'm looking at two types of that. I'm looking at a descriptive type of phenomenology from the Husserlian tradition, and also, I'm just going to keep going, an interpretive or hermeneutic phenomenology from the Heideggerian tradition. Okay, so now these are only to give a headspace to the Western counterparts that are trying to understand this, because I'm trying to bridge, right? I'm trying to have two-eyed seeing within something that is a cultural interface, because it is because I put it forth as an Indigenous place of learning, it still exists within a council municipality that has rule and regulation. And you have to ask for an allowance. Can I please do this? So it comes to a point where you have to, appeal to them and somehow make logic that you're just not out there, which is a vibe that you sort of get, you can't be just out there with the trees and what's going on, mate? The trees aren't speaking, the animals are speaking. You need a Western framework to understand this, and this is what I'm trying to marry. So my interpretive phenomenology is strictly for the Western participants. Okay? The Indigenous component has their own way of knowing the land. Okay? So where are we now? Okay, so that's what it looks like. So if we go back to the idea of two-eyed seeing as a cultural interface, we have a Western perspective and we have Indigenous perspectives. And what I was hoping for is we move through a series of things. And I was hoping for it initially to be a blind evaluation study. So we have Indigenous elders, knowledge holders, using Indigenous research methods, walking country, yarning, Indigenous sensory knowledge system. And then we have a Western perspective, and they're built environment experts, educational experts, and they're using Western research methodologies such as phenomenology, illumination, and connoisseurship. And if we can get to the point as we go down, beyond sharing and collaboration, I'm trying to do something like that for my PhD, although it might be too big a thing to try and pull off. But the idea was like, can we get some sort of agreement whether this is actually an artefact of Indigenous engagement, or is it just an example of it, just artefacts from my imagination? Okay, and I think that seems to be the problem in trying to get the Western knowledge system to understand the Indigenous knowledge system. They can't quite get the embodied lived experience. It's like it's an imaginative thing, it's something. It's like Aboriginality, or it's something locked in the past. It's a thing that used to happen. Those knowledges and those understandings don't exist today in the same way. Okay, and that's just how I mapped it. We'll get beyond that. And so these are really big calls, I know. Like, who am I to be doing such things? So let's look at a little bit of the context and legitimacy of my Indigenous understanding. And it's important to understand that I'm very humble about this. I really haven't done anything particularly special other than listening to what I have to do and then doing it. And when I mean listening, I mean that's using those Indigenous sensory knowledge systems. Or it's just a coincidence. It's just a whole bunch of happy accidents and it's my imagination. And the other thing is, anyone can do what I've done. You've just got to want to do it enough. It's a very long, hard slog where you question yourself quite a lot, because you can't really run it by anyone as such unless they come there to see it and experience it. Okay, so my ancestral connection is to saltwater freshwater peoples, and predominantly they are these countries will be difficult to, but they're all along the east coast of New South Wales. It's probably the nations of Yuin, Gumbaynggirr and Eora are probably within 1,000 kilometres, and they're side by side. So pretty much since my great-great-grandmother was put on a mission with the first name only. My great-grandmother, grandfather, mother and I, all our experience, when we talk ancestrally, and from my lived experience has been within saltwater freshwater, sort of freshwater landscapes. Okay, I won't go through that. It's just my mother, but my grandmother was a bit of a rebel. When they threw her children out at the local school, she marched on down to Sydney, probably a 500-kilometre journey in 1915, knocked on the door of the Department of Education, because at the time the son was being taken underage to war. And because I guess it was a job at the time, they thought about it, but then at the same time they took the children out of school, and it was like, so she went all that way. I don't know how she would have done it, and rocked up and with my grandfather who was going to war and said, listen here, why should he be fighting for a country where you won't even allow his brothers and sisters to go to school? You either put him back in or I'm taking him out of the army. Anyway, they reversed their decision. So there is a political angle to my family's history. And whether I'm channeling that or not remains to be seen, but I think so through this research project. So I always have these questions, am I Indigenous, am I Gumbaynggirr? And that really depends on who you ask. It's a very difficult question for me because I haven't really been overly accepted within my community, just because of the way that the type of interpretation of my indigeneity that I'm going through. But anyway, these are some questions I ask. Am I, we, me and country, engaging with the co-creational discovery of place, memories and experience of a life lived within the Gumbaynggirr landscape? I said yes. Is it fragmented? Yes, it is fragmented. But can I extrapolate from this fragmentation? Yes. And that's the interesting part. And that's a good thing for me to do. I have discovered something, and I'm opening it up to find out if there's something more for other people. Is what I'm doing, or what I we doing, increasing the capacity for what can be known about Indigenous knowledge? And I think yes. I think it's something. I mean, it's a very, it's an unusual position. I feel very fortunate that I've been in this situation because it all came about quite accidentally. We can go to that in questions and whatnot. There's also this concept of walkabout, a contemporary walkabout. I discovered my lineage to my Indigenous path quite late in life. It was something that my grandfather decided wasn't helpful for my mother and the family, so he just didn't identify. And then you sort of lose everything, and it's like, oh, how do I? Well, what does it mean? To find out at uni you do an Aboriginal education unit of general studies unit. You come home at the dinner table, so whoa, I learned all this stuff about Aboriginal people. Wow, it's quite interesting, Mum. And then it's like, oh, well, grandfather was. What do you mean? And so it's like, all of a sudden you're halfway through your life, I wonder what that means. And you go through a little bit of schooling and whatnot, and you learn, you might get a black line master that you fill out, or you're learning about indigeneity through a Western way, through a subject-object distancing. And so it was sort of interesting, but it's like when I know now about lived experience, understanding in indigeneity, which is your connection to the natural world, it's like, oh, that's very interesting. And so I would say now I feel like I do have something to offer, and I feel like that I have an insight into what it means to be Indigenous. And so with the idea of contemporary walkabout, it's like, did I journey to a rite of passage using time alone to reflect upon spiritual matters, entangled consciousness, to discover who I am as a co-created, self-determining Aboriginal person? Well, I think I did. Now, beyond my opinion, it gets back to this idea of artefacts. Okay, so I'm relying heavily on them, and I'll get to some of them and show you, but it's sort of something that doesn't transcribe to a screen. Well, the lived experience. On grey morning, when we went out to have a look, it was raining, we're crossing a river, we're getting there, like it's an actual place, it's a space, and that is a defining thing of my indigeneity. When I'm sitting here talking about these things and whatnot, it's just representations, And it's the same with language, like when you're talking language, you are expressing an understanding of being Indigenous, It's not like it's a lived thing, you're thinking it, it's coming out. Even though I don't know that, but I can understand that and appreciate that. Okay. Is my understanding and experience of Indigenous knowledge drawn directly from country? Yes, it is. Is my understanding of being Gumbaynggirr in India drawn from community and human-to-human acculturation processes? No. No, it hasn't been. Do I speak traditional Gumbaynggirr language? No. Do I want to? Yes. Does country speak to me? Well, that'll be up to other people to decide, essentially, because otherwise it could be just my imagination. Okay. And that's part of the legitimacy of the utilising at the cultural interface blind evaluation experiment. It's like, has something happened, or is it just me? Now, another interesting thing with like caring for country and how much do I care. You see that little dot there? That was me. That's my place. That was in the fires. I stayed. I elected to stay. I don't know why. Yet again, it doesn't make any sense. But that's the whole thing with my experience. A lot of these things don't make much sense as to why you do things from a Western perspective. And so that is an experience I've had with country. And the funny thing is, a lot of things changed after that experience as well. But we can talk about those. I hope at any point, just write down those little points if you have any questions to ask. So therefore, as my place and my relationship becomes, as place and my relationship becomes, so does my understanding of the processes of change and information exchange. Always in that symbiotic order, hence my relationship with country and my path back into indigeneity was formed through the process of co-creation of place and experience and entanglement. Here, our research primarily deals with the foundational nature of Indigenous knowledge. The ancient and traditional closed loop aspects of Indigenous knowledge play a role, but are mainly referential in search of commonalities, synchronicities, and moving forward synergies. So I'm hoping that my experience through local ecological knowledge with this place reflects traditional understandings that I'm not aware of. Traditional understandings and traditional corresponding things, I guess, with other Indigenous cultures or in other people of Indigenous knowledge that come there. So that's sort of what, that's sort of where it's at. And so if we think in terms of artifactual connection to water knowledge systems and ancestral guidance, like I can give you some examples here of the things that I see. And when you talk about ancestral guidance, and it's such a subjective area, okay? So, and I could be talking about things that I'm imagining or whatnot, but this is where the photography comes in. When I see things that are presented to me, I just take a photo, and then there's a meaning that comes from those photos, okay? So if we're thinking about all the things I've talked about, my ancestral guidance comes from saltwater, freshwater people, and they're usually within a water context, okay? So I'm going to start. So here's some images. Sorry about all the words, but I had to just get through it all. Now we can look at some interesting things. So these are just photos, single photos, taken of things. They haven't been flipped or anything. So what happens is I'm usually lying by the river, sideways, like lying down. And then imagery will just appear. And because I see it from sideways, I rotate the photo 90 degrees, because when you're looking at it, you usually stand, okay? So I don't know if you can see at the right side, as you're looking at it, the right side is the water, because you can see. And through that I see I see a lot of totemic symbolism that's relevant to myself. I mean, people are going to look in it and see all sorts of things, and that's fine. But it's just really what I see, because at the moment that's what country was presenting to me. So I'll whip through some of these. These are, and the interesting thing here is these are taken from the other side of the river of my property. So the light shining onto those rocks and being reflected comes through the trees on my property, okay? So it's like a two-way. So it's the light that's coming through has to be filtered, and then the light that's refracted has to be filtered. And so that's a wide shot of the experience. These are all across different times and days, and like along the different perimeters of the place. But so I guess if I was an artist, and this was like 300 years ago or before photography, I would have sat there, looked at it, and tried to grab some ochre and tried to paint the imagery. But just because it is what it is in this century, I just seem to take a photo of it. I'm not much of an artist anyway. I'm on. I think, so, I mean, that's the funny thing. I mean, that's how the river looks at the day. And yes, you know, the shadow and the light becomes, you know, whatever it is. That's my experience, you know. That's my experience when I sit there. Now, the thing is, though, through learning to see this imagery in the freshwater context, it's actually translatable to seeing it in the saltwater context. And although it's a different backdrop and whatnot, I still manage to see or be drawn to different imagery, but still connected to my story. So I'm going to move into some saltwater imagery that I see. And the saltwater imagery is at the end of this river. There's the sand. That's a rude shock when that one comes in. So just to finish up, I make no claim to speak for others. I speak for no other nation, mob or clan. I offer my unculturated experience, practice and unearthed knowledge of Indigenous learning systems gained through working isolated in Gumbaynggirr country. My enculturation into becoming Gumbaynggirr has come from my relationship with place within country, through remembering what was, what is, as part of recreating, rebinding, remaking, reimagining protocols, honouring elders and custodians, human and non-human. This is the work of interpersonal, intercultural, human and non-human collaboration for the betterment and understanding more deeply of Indigenous knowledge learning systems. And just finally, yet also understanding that within many Indigenous communities there's a deep conservatism and unwillingness to upset the status quo. And in these environments, any agents of change, whether educators, researchers or activists, are regarded as suspect. While I believe that my research objectives will be overwhelmingly positive, I will be vigilant and sensitive to the challenges of intertwining Indigenous knowledges and the academic process, including issues such as the perceived values of Indigenous knowledges, knowledge protocols, cultural constraints, access to Indigenous knowledge, and the misrepresentation of Indigenous knowledge. Let's go back to an image or something. Are there any questions? Is that because you're looking at notes so you don't have any questions?
Maybe I can answer.
Sas?
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting. But how can we combine Indigenous knowledge and Western science? Because Indigenous knowledge is holistic, right? While Western knowledge is more like anthropocentric, Eurocentric.
Correct.
Howard, can I give him an example?
Correct.
Howard? Howard,
Yes.
can I give them one example?
Of course, I've got an example too, but yeah, go.
Just look at the book Sand Talk by,
Oh yeah.
have you seen it?
Yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Sand Talk by, why can't I think of his name now? Tyson.
Porter.
Tyson, yeah.
You should know that.
I know, I was on his doctoral committee. When he wrote his PhD, it was like nothing I have ever seen, ever. And he did precisely what you're asking, how can you do that? And out of that, he's written Sand Talk and yes story, no story, what is it? Good story,
Yeah, right story, wrong story.
Right story, wrong story. He's done a bunch of books, and it all looks at that combination. One of the things that he did in his doctoral dissertation was he took Aboriginal art forms like a boomerang, and he showed how they represented models that you find in Western science. And he put language to it to help people see how it worked. Different tools, different items that you find in Aboriginal culture. All right, Howard, what were you going to say?
Yeah, look, that's true, but it's only going to be an attempt, because this is the thing. You have a government that, like I went back to that idea of the in-between space. It will never go back to how it was, and the thing is, it's a constant. There's a contentious fight. I mean, you're trying to get them to understand a little bit more at every point, in their own terms, in their own language, for more allowances that they're going to give. You know, like, so if we're talking, you know, if rhetorically they say, oh, okay, we've done some studies, yeah, Aboriginal spirituality is a baseline for, you know, for Indigenous health. So they will say that, but it's like, well, and then what? Okay, so if you know that improving Aboriginal people's connection to country or their spiritual journey is something that needs to be done for them, how do you go about doing it? And all you can do is try to explain, give metaphors, give methods, try and bring in their methods. But I completely agree about, I mean, this is the whole thing between the subject and the object divide. But some Western, like I was surprised when I sort of tried to read Martin Heidegger. But the Western mind can, if it untangles itself, understand Indigenous concepts. You know, this idea of, his idea of Dasein, or being in the world. You know, you are in it and you are coping with it. You know, it's not like, there's just one thing that you look at, and then there's another thing you look at, and there's another thing you look at. There's all these different types of knowledge systems within the body, and the West understands that. They have practical knowledge, and they have, there's Merleau-Ponty has the phenomenology of perception, where he understands that, body and your perception comes through your whole body, not just through your mind. So I do agree with what you're saying. It's very difficult, but I mean, all I'm trying to do is shine a light through their language, through their understanding, their methodology, on what's happened, in that they might consider more of a third space or a grey area to allow these sorts of Indigenous understandings that don't fit into a spreadsheet to happen, just with the confidence that, okay, well, we know that there's those things that are going to happen out there, and there are going to be spiritual experiences, or there are going to be embodied experiences, and because we can't get them into the spreadsheet, that's okay. That's okay, but we're going to allow it. They have to allow it, like I'm not allowed to do anything on my land, other than within my mind if I bring people out there, but I can't do anything formally. It's like, oh, no. You've got to have a development application, and you've got to go through all that process. So I totally understand that, but it's about the journey and the fight, really. Does that help answer in your mind? Yeah. I'm just looking through some images.
Well, we've come
Did that help? Did that answer a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we've come to the end of our talks.